Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenour, and we have another really good episode in store for everybody today. I hope you all had a really nice week. I just wrapped up my first week back to school. I graduated back in 2019, so I took a year off, and it was interesting being all online for the first time, but I'm excited to learn a lot this semester. It's going to be a very interesting experience, and a new experience at that. We have a lot to get into today, between recaps from games and then a little recap from the trades. One team made about 6 steps forward and might have inserted themselves into the World Series conversation, so we'll see who that is. So for today's episode, I want to first get into another recap of games from Tuesday, September 1st. We are quickly approaching postseason time, so we shall see how these last few games really play out as we enter into the second half of the year. Next, I'll get into some trade gradings, going around the league to the different teams that have made some moves leading up to the trade deadline on August 31st. A lot of big-name players were on the move, and one team has really increased their World Series odds just with the moves they made. After that, I want to get into a little foreshadowing of the second half of the year and discuss what I feel could happen, some teams that might make some late-season pushes for the first, place, or for playoffs, some players that might start to drop off and cool down from a hot start, just some forecasting of the second half, and then be sure to stick around for the final minutes of the show as I discuss the different creative ways fans have been viewing games while not being allowed, something that caught my eye while watching the Phillies game the other night, and how fans might be able to creatively continue to view games this year with fanless stadiums being kind of the normal now, unfortunately. Hopefully that does become kind of a thing of the past sooner rather than later, but moving forward, it's probably going to be here for a while. So we'll see what kind of creative ways fans have been able to go and view games outside of the stadium, and some creative ways in which teams might allow fans to also be around the stadium come playoff time, or maybe even next year to view games. We'll see about that. But again, we're going to get into that later on. I want to now dive into some recaps from September 1st. And again, there was a lot of big games. I mean, there were some big blowouts, if you will. I mean, it was an evening of blowouts. So the first one, 12-1 win for the Tigers over the Brewers, and they jumped all over Milwaukee. I mean, Detroit scored 2 runs in the top of the third, 2 in the top of the fourth, and then they scored 2 in the top of the sixth. The only one run that Milwaukee was able to muster up was a Christian Yelich's solo home run. So the one time that he actually does something all right, the one time this year that he actually hits pretty well, it comes in a 12-1 win, or 12-1 loss. So right there, again, showing that Christian Yelich is not the Christian Yelich of the last 2 years this season, unfortunately, and it's starting to show for Milwaukee. I mean, they're starting to slip a little bit. They're currently sitting in about third place right now in the division, so, and especially with the fact that the Cardinals have played not as many games as they have, and they're still, a good 2 games ahead of Milwaukee. Could Milwaukee maybe make a wild card spot? Possibly, but we'll have to see, because, again, their play has not, really lived up to the caliber that it should be going into the postseason. Same with, now, on the other hand, though, Detroit has been playing much better as of lately. I mean, Detroit's been on an absolute roll. We're going to talk a lot about them later on in the show, but they are 8-2 over their last 10 games, 17-16 this year, and they've started to really pick up play. I mean, when they first came onto the scene in the beginning of the season, everybody, including myself, were probably very surprised, very shocked at how well they were playing. Then they started to cool off a little bit. They kind of became the normal Detroit Tigers, if you will. But having Jacoby Jones go down with an injury recently, and they're actually starting to play much better, maybe that's a sign that they might be able to move forward and push forward, even with one of their main pieces out of the lineup right now. So we'll see what happens with Detroit in the AL Central. Moving on to the next next game, again, another big-time blowout. Cardinals over the Reds 16-2. And this was in part because of a 6-run first inning, a 2-run second inning, and a 1-run third inning by St. Louis. So right there, you're going into the fourth inning with a 9-0 lead over Cincinnati. And again, Cincinnati, I feel like I've drilled this in many times about them, but they are disappointing. They are very disappointing. Falling to 15-21 now. Cardinals now move to 14-13, second place in the NL Central. And again, somehow, some way, St. Louis is always able to get wins. They're always a very good winning ball club. Against other rivals in their division, they also have played very well, and that's another big thing. They play well against their division opponents. They play well against other teams in the MLB, obviously, but being able to take down the Brewers, being able to take down the Cubs, being able to play against those teams that are usually floating around the top of the division, that's a great sign. And right now, Cardinals, they did everything they could and more against the Reds last night, and it proved. It really did show. The Reds were only able to score 1 run in the bottom of the 6th and then 1 in the bottom of the 9th, but that bottom 9 win, obviously not going to do a whole lot when you're down 16-1 going into that inning. So great win for the Cardinals last night. Colton Wong had a 4-hit game. Joey Votto did hit a solo home run. So Joey Votto's still doing Joey Votto things, but again, it was not enough as they were not able to come out on top over St. Louis. Next game, Blue Jays Marlins. Marlins winning this one in a close 3-2 decision. Toronto taking the first run of the game in the first inning, and then Miami scoring 1 run in the bottom of the 3rd. Toronto answered with a run in the top of the 4th, and then the bottom of the 6th and the bottom of the 8th both proved to be runs for the Miami Marlins, which now puts them at 16-15, while the Blue Jays are 18-16. So two teams that would otherwise, about 2 weeks ago, at least for the Blue Jays, probably be completely out of the playoff picture, and the Marlins were kind of, teeter-tottering on, are they going to make a run at it, are they not, kind of in this limbo state. Blue Jays, they've been playing much better lately. Obviously not getting the win on Tuesday, but the Marlins picking up Starling Marte, and he did everything and more for this team last night. Hit the go-ahead home run for them in the bottom of the 8th, so proving to be a huge acquisition for them at the trade deadline. And I really, first off, and I'm going to talk about the Arizona Diamondbacks later on, but I was very confused as why they gave him up. Now, I know they probably didn't want to pay him all the money that he was going to make and that he was, going to ask for, but at the same time, now they're missing that bat in their lineup. Starling Marte hitting his 3rd home run of the season. He's batting over 300 this year, having a really, really good year. John Birdie also hit a solo home run for the Marlins. So some good power hitting out of the Miami Marlins lineup, which is always a great sign of, moving into the second half of the season. How are they going to make a move, maybe towards first place, but at least hold on to that second place spot? Because the Phillies and the Mets, they're both, they're still knocking at the door. As much as, I've been critical of the New York Mets recently, they're still right there. They're still chipping away at their division lead, and they're still, trying to make some noise. The Phillies and Marlins are tied for second place right now. The Phillies, they could actually take that second place spot from the Marlins. It's just a matter of, can the Phillies prevent themselves going on, a 5-game losing streak or a 6-game losing streak? A lot of the times you'll see them this year go on a 5 or 6-game winning streak, and then they'll drop 3 of the next 4 or 4 of the next 5. And with how well the Marlins have been playing and their new acquisition with Starling Marte, the Phillies cannot afford that to happen. So, again, going to be very fascinating to see how the NL East shakes out towards playoff time. Next game, a final in 11 innings. Cubs-Pirates. Cubs winning this one 8-7. And the Pirates, again, they cannot get anything to go. They are now 10-23. They are dead last in the NL Central. They are the worst team in the NL. They're the worst team in baseball, really. And so, by no shock are they not able to come out and get those kinds of wins against these division opponents, especially top-tier opponents, because they can't close it out. Chicago scored the first 4 runs of the game, so the Cubs scored the first 2 runs of the game, and then Pittsburgh scored a run in the bottom of the 2nd, so it's 2-1 going into the 3rd. And then Chicago would score 4 runs, so now that makes it 6-1, and then somehow, someway, Pittsburgh able to tack on 4 runs in the bottom of the 6th and then 1 in the bottom of the 8th, tied it up at 7, and then going into extras, they tied it up at 6, and then going into extras, both teams scored 1 run in the 10th, and then the Chicago Cubs scoring that go-ahead run in the top of the 11th. So Chicago, I mean, as much as I'm not a big fan of them, they are, again, like the Cardinals, a very good winning ball club that are able to, get wins when it counts the most. Dropping an extra inning game where they were up 6-1 at one point and losing to the Pirates, that would not have been good. That would have not been a great sign for them moving forward. And, especially you don't want to lose, and with the Cardinals, nipping at their heels, you don't want to lose these pivotal games to teams like the Pirates. You don't want to drop 2 of 3 or get swept by the Pirates because, again, teams like the Cardinals or the Brewers, they'll start to make a little bit of, they'll start to shrink the gap and really minimize the distance between the Cubs and themselves, the Cardinals and the Brewers, that is, in that division. So, again, the Central, another very fascinating case, but, I mean, honestly, they're the worst division in baseball. They only have 2 teams above 500, and a couple weeks ago, they were the only division with only 1 team above 500. Everybody else was 400 and below. So, again, not a great division this year, and it's starting to show, but, again, we'll see if Chicago can hold it out or if the Cardinals make some sort of miraculous push towards that first-place spot. Next game, a little NL East matchup. Nationals-Phillies. Phillies winning this one 6-0, and Philly scoring all 6 runs in the 5th and the 6th inning, 2 coming in the bottom of the 5th and 4 coming in the bottom of the 6th. Andrew McCutchen hit a big 3-run home run. Phillies did a really nice job at shutting out the Nationals. I mean, the Nationals, again, I did not expect them to be the team of last year. I did not expect them to be the World Series defending team that I think some people might have thought that they were going to be, but did I expect them to be 12-21 right now? No, I did not expect that. Phillies, again, 16-15. They are right there in second place for the NL East, and they could very well start making a move on the Braves and maybe even start to distance themselves from the Marlins. But again, the Marlins are starting to play well too. So there's a lot of shifting around to go between the Phillies, Marlins, and Braves, and then again, we can't forget about the Mets. So we'll see again how that all shakes out. Next one, Yankees, Rays, and again, I'm going to get into this one a little bit later in my forecasting because I think that the Rays are going to be a really good team come playoff time. Getting the loss in this one, though, Yankees winning 5-3, and the injury-ridden Yankees somehow, some way getting it done. DJ LeMahieu hit 2 home runs in that one. Gio Urshela also had a really big game, hitting a double in that win against the Rays. I mean, good solid win for the Yankees because honestly right now with how their team is, with Stanton on the IL and Judge back on the IL and Gleyber Torres on the IL, guys starting to get injured at the worst possible time, that's a perfect opportunity for the Rays to strike and really try and separate themselves from the Yankees, and they've done just that. I mean, right now, the Rays are sitting in first place. They're 3.5 games ahead of the Yankees. So this Rays team has come to play this year. They're looking at it as this is our year. We're taking the division, and we're taking it from the Yankees, and, that's final. The Rays are moving to 25-12 now on the year. Yankees scored 1 run in the bottom of the first, 1 in the bottom of the third, and then the Rays put up 2 in the top of the 5th. But then it was a 3-run bottom of the 6th inning for the Yankees, and then a 1-run top 7 for the Rays. That was pretty much it in that one. And again, the Yankees need to, not drop 3 straight against the Rays like they did a couple weeks ago, or drop 2 of 3 to the Rays, because they're starting to potentially see their chances at winning the AL East dwindle each and every day, because the Rays, it seems like they've gotten better and better each and every game this season. Next game, Braves, Red Sox. Braves winning this one 10-3, and what can I say about the Red Sox, right? Very similar situation with the Pirates. Just 2 of the worst teams in baseball. And I know the Red Sox are kind of they're in a little bit of a rebuild phase right now. They got rid of a couple other players during the trade deadline. Obviously we all know, who's missing from that team this year in Mookie Betts. They got rid of Mitch Moreland, great hitter for them this year. Again, kind of an older guy, but he's been playing very, very well. And he's somebody that, especially in that lineup, they would love to have kept around if they were to be in any sort of playoff picture, but I can kind of see why they would get rid of him. Again, I think they're looking down the road. They know that at least this year they're not going to be anything special, maybe even next year, but again, they've got pieces for the future. Alex Verdugo, I think, is going to be a very good player come, 2 or 3 years down the road. Same with Rafael Devers, but again, this is not their year. Atlanta scoring 2 runs in the top of the first, Boston scoring 2 in the bottom of the third. So tie ball game going into the 4th and 5th innings. Neither team scored in either one of those. And then top of the 6th was an Atlanta 2-run inning. And Atlanta put on one more in the top of the 7th, and then 5 runs in the top of the 8th, and that was really the deciding factor. Marcell Ozuna hitting 3 big home runs, and he's really benefited this year from this universal DH. And I had a feeling that as a guy that's not a great fielder, somebody that you don't really want to have in the outfield, especially for defensive purposes, his bat and his talent is what is needed much more in the lineup from the plate, and it's starting to show. I mean, the Braves are 21-14 now. They are in first place in the NL East, 3 games ahead of both the Marlins and the Phillies. I really don't see the Marlins and the Phillies catching the Braves, but if the Phillies or the Marlins started playing, very good the last 2 or 3 weeks, and the Braves had 2 injuries occur to them and 2 big guys go down, that could possibly open things up in that NL East division. I could really see that happening. Max Fried, he's been unbelievably lights out this year on the mound for the Braves. They did pick up some pitching during the trade deadline, which I thought that was a very smart move on their part because they are really lacking in that department. So great moves during the trade deadline for the Atlanta Braves. Next game, Mets Orioles. Orioles winning this one 9-5. Mets now are 15-21, while the Orioles are 16-19. Baltimore got right to it in the bottom of the first inning, scoring 3 runs and then 2 more runs in the bottom of the second. But New York would put on 2 runs in the top of the second and 1 run in the top of the third. So going into the fourth, it's 5-3. I mean, not a huge difference, not a huge deficit to be down. But then the Mets scored 2 more in the top of the sixth, and then Baltimore responded with 3 in the bottom of the sixth and then 1 in the bottom of the 7th. Renato Nunez had 2 home runs on the day. He's been a really nice, pleasant surprise for this team. Anthony Santander also hit his 11th home run, and he's been a big part of it. Also, Hanser Alberto, another guy that's been playing very, very well. They've got a lot of really good hitters, and they picked up and they got rid of some pitchers, but they did pick up some good hitting, some good prospects, some guys that have good hitting numbers in the minors, guys that are going to probably be nice pieces for them down the road at least. So again, this might be a team that is thinking, hey, we might not have expected to be this good this year, and we did not expect our players to be, playing this well. So we want to go after guys that we can maybe build for the future around this core group of guys we already have with Santander, Nunez, Alberto, guys that have been playing very well all year long. And they picked up, again, 2 prospects that I think could be good down the road. And it will be interesting to see, though, how they kind of figure out the pitching situation, right? Alex Cobb is there, considered, I guess, their ace. I mean, I don't know if I would consider him an ace on many other teams. He's got above a 4 ERA, so, again, not great ace-like numbers, but he is really their best pitcher, in all honesty. So it would be interesting to see in the offseason if they go after any sort of pitching. And again, I think this might be a year that the Orioles say, hey, we might not make the playoffs, but let's build for the future, so maybe in 2 or 3 years, we kind of become the new Rays, and we start taking, the division from the Yankees and the Rays, because I think the Rays will be good for a couple years. So next game, Indians-Royals. Indians winning this one in a huge blowout fashion, 10-1. And Cleveland, again, jumping all over Kansas City, 3 runs in the top of the first, 2 in the top of the second, and then Kansas City only scoring that 1 run in the bottom of the 6th inning. Cleveland scoring 1 in the 6th, 1 in the 7th, and 1 in the 8th. So big 10-run spot for the Indians in that one. Royals move to 14-22. Indians are 22-14, and that is getting very interesting in the AL Central with the Indians and with the White Sox both being tied for first place now, taking the first place spot actually from the Twins, which when I looked at the standings, yesterday or the day before, I was floored by that because I thought the Twins were going to be the first place team by leaps and bounds because of how they were playing in the beginning of the year. Chicago has all of a sudden woken up. I mean, they've become one of the hottest teams in baseball, and the Indians have also continued to be very good. But, again, don't discount the Tigers, because if they continue to play the way that they played against the Brewers on Tuesday, this could be a team that we might start seeing, in the wild card picture maybe, and they could start making some noise, come postseason time. And if not, maybe making a postseason spot and making the playoffs, they could probably be be a team that disrupts somebody else's playoff chances, which again, I mean, who doesn't love those types of teams? If your least favorite team gets their postseason opportunity taken away because a team that wasn't going to make it but still had a good year, swept them in the last series of the season, I mean, that's a pretty nice way to cap off the season, I think. Although you don't make it, you prevent another team from making it, and you get 3 straight wins going into the next season. That's pretty cool. So, great win by the Indians. We'll see how that AL Central shakes out towards the end of the season also. Next game, Rangers-Astros, another extra inning game. This was a final in 10 innings. Texas scoring the first 2 runs in the top of the first, and then scoring another run in the top of the fourth. So, going into the 6th inning, Texas is up 3-0, but that is where Houston started to get things going from the plate, scoring 1 run in the bottom of the 6th, 3 in the bottom of the 7th, and then Texas able to score 1 run in the top of the 9th, forced the extra inning game, and then Texas scoring 2 runs in the top of the 10th, and then Houston scoring 1 run in the bottom of the 10th, and that was it for Houston. Texas really, I mean, they did a nice job at preventing Houston of making a full-blown comeback, because again, this Houston team, I don't know what to think of them, because one day I'm like, hey, they might make the playoffs. The next day I'm like, hey, they probably won't make the playoffs. It's such a 50-50 swing every single day. I ultimately don't think that they'll make the playoffs. I'll get into that again later on in my forecasting segment. But the Rangers being able to shut down Houston in a bottom 10 inning where they did score 1 run, so they did, they were making a comeback. They made it very apparent, hey, we are not going anywhere. We're not going down without a fight. Texas did a really nice job at holding them in the bottom of the 10th inning. So great job out of the bullpen for the Texas Rangers. Again, Astros moved to 19-15 while the Rangers are 13-21. So Texas, again, probably out of the playoff picture, but again, nice to see that they are kind of disrupting things for the Houston Astros in that AL West division. Next game, AL Central matchup, White Sox-Twins, Twins winning 3-2. And the Twins, I mean, they battled their way back in this one. White Sox coming out hot in the first inning, scoring 2 runs in the top of the first, and then Minnesota putting up 1 run in the bottom 5th frame, bottom 6th frame, and bottom 7th frame. Really, really nice job by the Twins to grind this win out. I mean, talk about a grind-out win, chipping away each inning, going in, getting 1 run, coming back, holding them in the top half of the inning, then coming back in the bottom half of the inning and getting another run, doing that 3 times, consecutive innings too. I mean, that is very good baseball. Byron Buxton had a huge go-ahead single in that bottom 7 inning that was really the deciding factor in this one. Luis Arias, he had an RBI double for the Twins as well. So some good hitting in some good spots for Minnesota. They're trying to reclaim that first place spot in the AL Central. The Chicago White Sox, though, they're going to have something to say about that. Them and the Indians, I think they both are going to have something to say about that, because the White Sox, they have one of the best hitting lineups in baseball, and the Indians have one of the best pitching rotations in baseball as well. So you've got 2 teams that, kind of are opposites of each other. And again, I'm going to get into this later on, but those 2 teams, it's going to be interesting to see how, their first place tie right now going into the second half of the season, how that plays out in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and moving forward, because this could be a very, down to the wire finish in the AL Central. Next game, and this was an alarming one. I mean, an alarming win for the Giants. 23-5 over the Rockies. Yes, it was a 23-5 win for the San Francisco Giants. And that's something that, I mean, you don't see 25 or 23 runs scored in a baseball game very often. You do not see, more than 15 runs scored very often in a baseball game either, but 23? That is, and what's even more impressive is they scored at least 1 run in every single inning except for the 9th. So they scored 3 in the first, 2 in the second, 2 in the third, 1 in the fourth, 1 in the fifth. They scored 7 runs in the top of the 6th inning. And I couldn't imagine being the Rockies and how long that 7th inning must have felt for them, because 7 runs to be scored. Unbelievable. 2 runs in the 7th and then 5 in the 8th. So they put up, 14 runs. They put up almost, half of their runs just about in 3 innings. 14 of their 23 runs coming in that, latter half of the game, 6, 7, 8 spots. That is very impressive, especially for the San Francisco Giants, who they've been very up and down. And with how, the Rockies have been lately, I mean, they've been really up and down. They started off hot. I mean, they were in first place at the beginning of the season, and now they're finding themselves in fourth place. I mean, they're behind the Giants right now by only half a game, but still, they're in fourth place right now. So talk about going from first to worst. I mean, they're not in, last place because that's the Diamondbacks, but the Rockies going from first to fourth place, that's a huge digression for them, especially with how well they were playing in the beginning of the season. 3 Giants players combined for 18 RBI. So when you've got 18 of your 23 runs coming from 3 guys, again, that is by no stretch of the imagination any sort of shock as to why you won that game. Alex Dickerson had 3 home runs for the Giants. Really great drive, really great game for him. And then Brandon Crawford driving in 6 runs himself. Say what you want about Brandon Crawford. I know a lot of people some people love him, some people hate him, some people think he's not as good as people, make him out to be. Some people think that he's a little overrated. I think he's still a middle-of-the-road, middle infielder in the league. I don't think he's as good as he was a couple of years ago, but I think he still is productive, and he showed it last night. I mean, 6 runs being scored by just him. That's pretty impressive. He's driving in that many runs. Nice job by Brandon Crawford. And this Giants team, who knows what will shake out with the Giants and the Rockies, and if, either one of those teams maybe makes a run for the wild card spot. So then the last game of the evening, again, another NL West matchup, Dodgers-Diamondbacks. Dodgers taking this one 6-3. Dodgers scoring runs in the first, the third, and then 2 in the bottom of the 5th and 2 in the bottom of the 6th. Arizona, I will say, they scored 2 in the top of the 9th, so they were knocking at the door, by the end of the game. They were trying to make a little bit of a comeback there. Again, it was not much as they were down 6-1 going into that inning as it was. Chris Taylor drove in 4 runs for the Dodgers. Nick Ahmed had a 2-run home run for the Diamondbacks. So some good hitting out of both teams, but again, the Dodgers, they're just so hard to outlast because they've got such a good offensive team. And quite frankly, and again, I'm going to get into this in my next segment here momentarily, San Diego, they might now potentially have the second best lineup in baseball, maybe even the best lineup in the NL. Who knows? I mean, they added some great pieces, and they've gotten some really, solid performances and efforts out of some other guys on this team. So we'll see how that all shakes out in the NL West, because I think the Dodgers and the Padres, they're going to make for a very interesting come down to the wire, last week of the season kind of finish, especially with the additions that the Padres made at the trade deadline. So that'll do it for us in this first segment, but stay right there, folks, because after the commercial, I'll get right into my trade gradings from the deadline and who came away from the deadline as winners and losers. Folks, stay right there. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Drac Ridenauer with you all, and in our first segment, I kick things off with a recap of games from Tuesday, September 1st. A lot of good matchups, some big blowouts, a lot of things going on around the league. Be sure to stay here with us on the GSMC Baseball Podcast for the last few minutes of the show, as I'll share some thoughts on the way fans have been viewing games this year, with games prohibiting fans, and how might fans or even businesses think of creative ways to have fans get the best in-person experience as possible this season, and for however long this lasts. And that, being no fans in the stands. So hopefully, again, like I said in the first segment, hopefully that is sooner rather than later, because I think we all are in agreement we want to get back to seeing games live in the stadium and sitting in the stands. Now, I want to get into the trade deadline moves that were made and hand out some gradings on which teams I feel made good moves and which I think might have, given too much away. So the first team, I have to say, made so many moves. I mean, they've put themselves right there in the World Series conversation, I think, and honestly have made themselves now one of the most power-hitting oriented teams in baseball. They might have one of the most loaded rosters now after their moves, and that is the San Diego Padres. I gave them a grade of an A+++. I mean, they did an unbelievable job. They made so many moves, and they, I think, are aware that they have to capitalize on this year because of how well they're playing and how they have a legitimate shot with a shortened season to find themselves in the World Series or to find themselves in the later on in the playoffs. Again, I mean, should I be calling them Slam Diego? Because I'm sure that is all they are going to do the rest of the season. This team made 2 huge acquisitions in addition to numerous other moves that they made. They first bolstered up their pitching, which I have talked with other people that is struggling some. And if they want to make that case for the playoffs and actually make a run, and mind you, this is a team that hasn't been in the playoffs since 2006, so they are itching for the playoffs right now. First, they added Trevor Rosenthal, who's been playing awesome all year long. 14 games out of the pen. He has 21 Ks, and he's got 3.29 ERA and only 7 walks. So it's a 3-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio is pretty darn good for a reliever, if you ask me. And I have mentioned many times how a struggling Kirby Yates coming in to close is never a good sign. But getting Pomeranz back now from the IL, and he's been lights out all season as well. I mean, he actually was inserted and has been put into as their new closer. They add a great piece in their bullpen with Rosenthal. So that has been, known for being one of their, one of the better bullpens in the MLB, and I think that they've already added to that with picking up Trevor Rosenthal. The Royals received Edward Olivares from the Padres for Rosenthal, but the Padres walked away with this one, and this wasn't the last trade they would make before the middle of the afternoon on Monday. They went after Mitch, and they next went after and acquired Mitch Moreland from the Red Sox. Now, a year ago, this would have probably been a harebrained idea to do. But with the year that Mitch Moreland is having, it is no shock that he is a highly sought after this season, potential trade piece for other teams like the Padres, and he's been having an unbelievable year. He's got a 1.177 OPS and a 328 average, mixed in with a wildly high OPS plus of 206 and 8 home runs. This fits perfectly in their offense. I mean, what more can you want out of that guy? He literally is exactly the type of player that most of 6 out of 9 or 7 out of 9 players on that roster are very similar in how Moreland is in terms of hitting and his power numbers that he brings. Now, if I'm the Dodgers, I'm worried. Not necessarily full-blown panic, but I would be legitimately concerned for that first-place spot in the West now, because the Padres, they're that much better with Moreland. They really are. And then they added more pitching with picking up Mike Clevinger, and let me tell you what, you add hitting, pitching, both starting and relieving, and they are 3 players who are leading candidates in their respective player categories in terms of pitching stats for Clevinger and Rosenthal and hitting stats for Moreland. You really solidify your spot in that World Series conversation. I know I keep saying it, but I do mean it. This will be a team maybe that makes their way to at least the NLCS, maybe even the World Series. Again, we know that Clevinger has been in some hot water with the Indians, and they received a slew of players, some prospects for Clevinger. So Cleveland is continuing to add pieces, but in all honesty, I'm not sure why you would get rid of Clevinger, especially if you are in the fight for first place and you are tied for first place right now. But we will get into them a little bit later. The Padres have just put themselves in a top 10 pitching team conversation as well, which is better than, 15th where they are sitting now in terms of team ERA. Again, let's also not forget who else they added, Austin Nola, who's another big-time power hitter, a nice catcher behind the plate for them, hitting over 300, a 900-plus, OPS type of player. So a guy that he's going to, again, bring that added offense that they are going to continue to, have. You figure out they've got, Tatis, Cronenworth, Myers, Machado, Nola. Now they've got Moreland also. They've got Grisham. Wow. That is a hefty lineup, and they are just starting to get, I think the depth and really the kind of the overall, rounded feel of how a lineup should be, especially with, good contact power hitters, great power hitters, and they've got all of those pieces right now. They're very similar to how the Yankees and Dodgers might be right now in terms of their, roster, the type of players that they have, so on and so forth. This Padres team has already been a blast to watch, but they are going to keep on exciting the fans and making noise in the league. I'm really excited to see how they, fare moving forward, and I hope that they don't become this typical unbelievable regular season team, get into the playoffs, and then they get swept in the first round. I would be very disappointed to see that, especially with how well that they've been doing this year. I have a good, strong feeling that this might be a year that San Diego might never forget. Next team that I have to, grade and make mention of, the Arizona Diamondbacks. I'm giving them a C. I'm giving them a C because they are not in, they're not in an incredible playoff spot, so I see why they might have unloaded some players, but at the same time, I wouldn't have unloaded the guys they did, or both of them at that. First off, getting rid of Robbie Ray, while this year, doesn't seem to be, such a bad move with an over 7 ERA that he has, he still is a high strikeout guy, and with a thin pitching staff as it is, Zach Allen being the leader in pitching ERA and strikeouts, you now have your second highest strikeout pitcher, and the only other one with 40 or more strikeouts, and those two are, 2 of the 3 that have 30 or more. So again, you've got Gallen, and then you had Robbie Ray, so really 2 of your best pitchers. Now you just opened up a huge, massive hole in the rotation, I think, with Robbie Ray being out. Again, his 7 ERA is nothing to be, proud of. It's nothing to really pay a bunch of attention to. But when you've got a guy that is striking out 200-plus batters in 4 of the last 5 seasons, it makes me scratch my head and wonder, hey, why would you get rid of him? Maybe he's just having a bad year. Again, they might have wanted to unload him because they didn't want to have to pay him so much, so that could have been a potential, possibility, but I'm not sure if I would have unloaded Robbie Ray. They also unloaded Starling Marte to the Marlins, which to the life of me makes no sense. I mean, if he is hitting that well, now I would, if I had to pick between unloading Ray and maybe someone else to pay Marte, I probably would unload Ray. I would get rid of Robbie Ray and get rid of somebody else in order to pay Starling Marte. He was expected a $12.5 million club option next year, so they didn't want to pay him that much money. And I know that, say what you want about Starling Marte, he's a very good hitter. When he comes to play and when he is at his best, he is one of the better, outfielders in the NL. I think he's a very good baseball player. I've always felt that he was kind of an underperformer and an underachiever, and this year he's really not doing that. And for them to get rid of him in the year that he is having makes no sense to me. Again, Marte's bat not in the lineup anymore, I think is crucial. They didn't do, horrendous on deadline day, but not great. Didn't really add much minus the lefty they got from the Blue Jays for Robbie Ray, Travis Bergen, and they really aren't in a great playoff spot. I mean, they're dead last in the West. They have fallen to, 14-22, which is tied, which is one of the worst records in the NL, and they could fight their way in the third to, maybe give themselves a better spot, but I just don't see them doing that, now with Marte out of the lineup. I mean, he was literally their leading hitter. He was one of their better hitters on the team. They still have Peralta. They still have Ketel Marte. So they still have, pieces in that lineup that will help them out and, potentially give them some added, boost maybe next year or the year after, but I mean that's such a big loss to their lineup. But maybe a few years down the road they might pan out for them. Maybe Bergen becomes a pretty good pitcher and he develops into a nice addition with Zach Gallen being their ace if they can keep him around. But again, only time will tell. So I'm giving them a C. Not great, but not terrible. So that is kind of how I viewed the Arizona Diamondbacks trade deadline day. Next team, Colorado Rockies. I'm giving them a solid B. I mean, I like the move they made. Not obsessed with it, but I definitely think it can benefit them in the long run and can be a nice move for them for the future. The Rockies acquired Michael Givens from the Baltimore Orioles for Tariq Vavra, who's a shortstop in the Rockies organization, and Tyler Nevin, who's a first baseman in their organization as well. So both minor league prospects for the Rockies. Givens, he's been pretty awesome this year for the O's. I mean, he has in 13 innings, he's got 19 Ks with only 6 walks and a 1.38 ERA, so some phenomenal relief pitching numbers, which is a great add to a team that, has the 22nd ranked ERA with a 4.99 ERA, right under 5, but they have the 4th most saves in the league as a team, so adding to the relief might be their strategy. Their rotation is all right. I mean, 2 guys with a 3.5 and lower ERA, 1 guy with 40 Ks, so the lack of Ks in their rotation can be made up for, the addition of Givens to the relief. Again, I don't think this is a move to be obsessed over, but I think it is a great add for them right now, especially if they want to try and finish out making it to the playoffs. I will say, they did give up 2 pretty solid prospects. I mean, I think the Orioles might have, I don't want to say that they lucked out in this, but I think that they, I think that they're looking down the road. They're looking into, the crystal ball and seeing their future, what's on the horizon for them. And like I mentioned in the first segment, they've got a lot of really good young core pieces right now. Really good hitters. They've got, one of the best hitting offenses in all of baseball. And adding, Vevra and Nevin, who, again, I'm going to get into them momentarily, they both, had put pretty good numbers in the minors for the Rockies, at least pretty solid power numbers. Two guys that are, pretty efficient home run hitters, solid RBI guys that as time goes on they could be developed into a little bit more. But again, I'm not obsessed with the Rockies move, but I like it overall. Next team, like I was mentioning, the Baltimore Orioles, I'm giving them a B-. I'm grading them as a B-. I would have liked to see the Orioles go after some more players, I feel. I think they are a team that right now is sitting in a good position to strike right at the perfect time in the season, but I think that, they may need that extra hitter, or they need that ace pitcher. And again, Cobb is only going to do so much. I don't think he's an ace. I think that he's an ace out of default, and as a result, you don't really have a whole lot else to work with, right? So I think they should have gone after some, better pitching. They got rid of Givens, like I just mentioned, who I personally figured was going to be moved. They did add 2 more prospects, which leads me to believe that this year of the Orioles being good maybe was seen as a surprise, and they want to now act on that and bring in pieces they could build for the future. Vavra and Nevin, who they acquired from the Givens trade, they are very nice future potential hitting to their lineup, and they could be pieces for down the road, but that is a big if. Whereas Givens, he's proved himself as a legitimate bullpen threat this year. The Orioles may have figured this wasn't going to be, a big year for them, but I think that they, should have maybe acted now, and in the event, maybe they don't make the playoffs or do as well, they're still priming themselves for the future. And again, with players like Santander, Alberto, Nunez, and others, it makes sense to maybe add another piece to their lineup. But they also unloaded another pitcher to the Braves, Tommy Malone. He was traded to Atlanta for 2 players to be named later. So they could be, most likely prospects of some sort. So I will give the Orioles credit. They went with a theme, trying to bring in young prospects to build for the years to come instead of, the here and now, and kind of thinking of, we have this very fine window, let's take advantage of it. And I don't think the Padres, and I don't mean to kind of relate that thinking to the Padres, but I think that maybe not necessarily to that extreme, but they're kind of thinking that along that way. They're going all in this year. It was very, very obvious from their moves during the trade deadline that they want this year to be their year. So maybe they are looking at it as, this is a small window, and potentially they might lose Tatis or other guys because of free agency. They won't be able to pay them, so on and so forth. So unlike the Orioles, though, they're kind of looking at it as, hey, let's look at it down the road. Let's look at it a long-term project instead of the here and now. So I like that thinking, though. I really do. Malone did pitch the second highest innings on the team and did have a 3.99 ERA, which was actually the second best ERA in the starting 5 rotation. They kept Cobb, like I mentioned, who could, maybe turn into an ace down the road. Again, he kind of is their ace right now, and maybe they hope that he does. But overall, I don't hate their moves. They made, because there was some sense in them. However, would have liked to see, them do a little bit more in terms of adding to the hitting. And who knows, maybe in the offseason they pick up some, big hitter that is going to pay off and really help them out down the road. Next team, and this is a head scratcher for me, Cleveland Indians. I'm giving them a grade of a D. I'm giving them a D because, why do you ask that I give this team a poor grade? Well, for one, they traded one of their best pitchers, or really their second option, in my opinion, to the Padres. And when the Indians are fighting for the division right now, they're actually tied for first, like I keep mentioning. You don't want to do that. You don't want to give up vital pieces to your success at all. The Indians, again, currently sitting in that tied for first place, and they are with the White Sox. They're neck and neck. Not to mention, the Tigers have won 8 of their last 10, so they're starting to get hot. The Twins are still one of the best teams in the AL. They have dropped to second place now, so they are in serious contention for the division this year, with many other teams also making a big run at the Central. They did get a number of players in return that could be, used as maybe building block pieces for them in the future. But this team, seems to be, a prime year for the Indians. This definitely seems to be a team that is primed for going deep into the playoffs and to really take the division. So why get rid of one of your star pitchers? I don't understand that. That makes no sense to me. That was a big head scratcher. When I saw that pop up on my phone, I was like, are they trying to lose? Are they trying to throw their season? Now, I will say, since he had been demoted, the Indians had actually seemed to not miss him at all. They were actually playing better when he wasn't around than when he was around, and they were playing great when he was around. So maybe they're looking at it as they don't want to, again, they're kind of a very, they are no strangers to being a team that has a very low tolerance for outbursts or for any sort of off-the-field immaturity or irresponsibility. I mean, again, Clevenger was kind of an off-field issue this year with the him breaking COVID-19 protocols. And the Indians, last year they got rid of Trevor Bauer. He was traded away to Cincinnati after, I think it was a couple on-field outbursts. I do remember him throwing a ball into deep center field from the mound when he was being taken out of the game. So a team that does not mess around. And again, if you are on the Indians, if you're a Cleveland Indians player, you should know that there's a no tolerance for any outlandish behavior, and they are making that aware right now through this trade. I think personally, they could have saved themselves from having to pay Clevenger also. He would have been probably asking for a large amount of money. I know that his service time is kind of coming to that point where he's going to be a free agent, and so he could be up for arbitration, be up for free agency, and they might not have wanted to hear his offer. They might not have wanted to hear how much he was asking for, and really wanted to pay him. So they said, hey, let's get rid of him now before we have to pay him and ship him off somewhere else. And now now he's the Padres problem. And I actually saw something very interesting. Mike Clevenger has had very little experience against NL West teams, and he's actually, I believe, he has a 2-5 record against NL West teams or against the Dodgers, one of the two. So a guy that doesn't have a whole lot of experience pitching against, a very power-hitting oriented division from top to bottom, really. Even with the Diamondbacks. But again, they could have saved themselves of having to pay Clevenger, but I think that, with how well that they're playing this year, I would keep him around for, and maybe ship somebody else off, maybe trade somebody else who's not hitting as well or not playing as well. Again, they added a lot of different, prospects, a lot of pieces for the future, so maybe they're looking down the road. Maybe they're looking to bring those guys up eventually and then use the guys they already have now, Jose Ramirez, Francisco Lindor, and try and build, these prospects around those main, state guys that have been around for a while in Cleveland. But again, I personally would not have unloaded Clevenger, especially with the second half of the season right now starting and playoffs around the corner, literally. I would not have done that, but again, that's just me, and I am not a GM. So, but a lot of different moves being made during the trade deadline. It was definitely exciting to see where players, might wind up or where they did wind up, where new guys were showing up around the league. It's always exciting to hear where, who the new face is on this particular team and to see which teams make the biggest moves. I think we all know who made the biggest moves of the deadline, with the Padres strengthening their roster that they have already built for this year. Watch out, MLB, because the Slam Diego Padres are coming for the World Series. So that'll close it out. So that will close things out for us here in our second segment on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Coming up after the commercial break, I'll give my forecast and prediction for the second half of the year and some things I feel could happen to different players and teams. Folks, it's been a lot of fun so far, but we got a lot more to go, so don't change that channel. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all still with me today. Jack Ridenauer again, and we just finished up discussing some trade deadline grades and which teams came away as big winners from August 31st and which teams seem to have otherwise maybe taken a step back. I want to now get into a little forecasting of the second half of the year. Some things I could see, maybe occurring, some teams starting to get hot and some teams, starting to cool off, which players might start to get hot, which players might start to cool off. So I'll start with some teams that I feel could be on the come up as we enter into the second half of the season. And the first team I have to make mention of is the Detroit Tigers. And I'm forecasting that they are going to make the playoffs through the wild card. They have been on a roll lately, and this is a team that surprised, I think, everyone with how well they played coming out of the gates to start this season. But also, they started to fall off a little bit as we entered into the halfway point of the season, as we kind of came up on game number 20, 22, approaching game 25. They were struggling a little bit, but recently they have been on a tear. They are 8-2 over their last 10 games and taking down some division rivals in those games as well, such as the Indians and the Twins. The Twins currently are only 2 games ahead of the Tigers. The Tigers are 17-16 right now, so if the Twins start to slip, they could find themselves being caught by the Tigers. They've over their last couple games, they've actually won 4 in a row, and they've absolutely crushed the Brewers in the last game, 12-1 on Tuesday. So the bats are starting to wake up, and the pitching has been lights out, and they've outscored their opponents in the last 4 games on this win streak that they're on right now, 27-8. So the offense is starting to pick up, and the pitching and the defense have both done their jobs. However, losing Jacoby Jones to a hand injury right when they are starting to gain some ground in the Central, that is never a good sign. It's going to come down, I think, to Miguel Cabrera, Jonathan Scoop, as I'll mention in a second, and company to really pick up the slack, since Jacoby was one of their best players all year, and he's really been the main hitting piece for them this season as well. I will say, Jonathan Scoop, he's been hitting very well as of late. I mean, he's batting .311 with 20 RBIs. He's got 8 homers. He's leading the team in home runs, and they're getting help from the bottom of their lineup as well with Victor Reyes, their 25-year-old right fielder. He's hitting .303 as of now, which is a great sign to have a guy in that, 7-9 batting slot hitting over 300. Now, sure, having Jones out of the lineup definitely hurts. I mean, he has the 3rd highest OPS on the team. He's tied for 2nd on the team in home runs. So his power numbers are there, and they do help out his team quite a bit. And it will just matter if they can have these other surrounding players like Scoop, like Reyes, like Miguel Cabrera really start to continue to push them forward and hopefully propel them into a playoff spot. But I do believe that if they keep this play up, this style of play up, and let's say the Twins or maybe even the White Sox or the Indians start slipping here towards the end of the season, they're going to be sliding right on into their, those spots in the division, and they could find themselves, if not winning the division, which I think is a little bit of a reach. I think that's out of the question, but getting in the playoffs through the wild card, I could definitely see the Tigers doing that. The next forecast I have, the next prediction, Charlie Blackmon will not hit 400 this year. He will not finish out hitting 400. Yes, I said it. He won't hit 400. Quite frankly, I don't think anyone will hit 400 this year. I know that was kind of a big, topic coming into the season. Will anybody hit 40, or will anybody hit 30 home runs? Will anybody hit 400 this year? A lot of very unlikely things, I think. I mean, maybe, the first half of the season, yeah, that was likely, but throughout the entire season, I just don't think so. And mainly because of how small the margin of error is this season. 1 week of someone hitting below 200, going 1 for 15 from the plate, and that's it. That is going to drastically affect someone's average to the point where they might have a harder time pulling it up again. Blackmon, I mean, he had been hitting 400 or better the entire year, all the way up until August 25th, so pretty recently, actually. So a good month of the season, which, this year is actually a good portion since it's a shortened season. Since then, the average has started to drop, not drastically, I would say, but noticeably, to the point where it's clear he's going to have to go on some sort of unbelievable tear to finish the year out to get back to that, above 400 mark. He's currently in a bit of a slump because since that August 25th win against the Diamondbacks, he has only 2 hits, which has been the reason why his average has started to lower, really. Only 2 hits in, I don't know how many at-bats, I didn't see how many at-bats, but he's not been hitting well at all as of recently. He also only has 4 RBIs RBIs in that span of time. So someone who is starting to show signs of struggle. Not too much that he is completely out of the top 10 of batting average. He's still one of the top hitters in the league, but I don't see him or really anyone hitting 400 this year. I know Donovan Solano was around that 400 mark as well. He was another big name in the NL that I personally did not think got enough notoriety for how well he was hitting, mainly probably because he was on the Giants and that they were not very good at that time. But again, not many guys have been hitting 400, and not many guys, I think, are really, I don't think anyone's going to hit 400. And you'd have to be playing out of your mind the entire time to do that, because it's, again, with a very small, amount of room for mistakes. As a result, a guy wouldn't be able to go on a 5 or 6 game slump. That just it would have to be completely out of the question, because that 5 or 6 game span, it could be the difference in hitting 400 on the year. And right now we're seeing it between August 25th and the date of recording, which is September 2nd. So, just about a week, maybe a day or two after. That's a slump right there that is putting Blackmon, 50 points below 500 or 400. So, again, not completely out of the question. He could maybe turn things around, but he would really have to start to heat up here soon. He would really have to start getting things going a little bit, and he'd have to really get back to the Charlie Blackmon of, early August, later July. Next prediction I have, and this might be a big, bold take, but honestly, in recent news and in recent days, I don't discount this. I don't discredit this happening, and it's the Rays. I think the Rays will win the AL East. I really do. I can't believe I'm saying it myself, actually, but yes, I think that the Rays, as of right now, could win the East, especially with how banged up the Yankees are right now. They are vulnerable. The Yankees are vulnerable, and I think the Rays know that they are, they're ready to strike, and I think the Rays are aware that they smell, they smell taking the East. They smell blood from the Yankees, and so they're wanting to strike right now, and they want to take that division crown away from New York, especially as a small market team. I mean, how cool would that be to see the Rays take the East from probably the largest baseball market, maybe next to the Dodgers and I don't know, maybe the Cubs or a couple other teams, but the Yankees, for the most part, have probably the largest payroll team and one of the largest, successful storied organizations ever. They're 8-2 in their last 10. That is the Rays, and they have an incredible road and home records. Both of them well above 500. They're currently 3.5 games ahead of the Yankees and almost 100 winning percentage points ahead of the Yankees. So this is starting to look like a little, dethroning of the almighty Yankees, if you will. The Rays have put together, back-to-back 90-plus win seasons, and they've seen themselves in and out of the playoffs over the years. A small market team, like I mentioned, with not a great fan base that somehow finds the ability to win ball games against larger market teams like the Yankees. Those are the teams that everybody loves rooting for, though. Those are the underdog stories that you love hearing about come playoff time. Now, with the way that they've been playing, though, I don't see them as an underdog. I actually am starting to see them more as a top-tier baseball team in the MLB. Brandon Lowe has been the star of this team. He's only batting 264, which is a little bit lower than what he was batting about a month ago, but his OPS numbers are impressive with a 953 clip, 27 RBIs, which puts him in the top 10 of RBIs in the AL. Now, here's what's wild and really why I think this team has no sign of slowing down and can really, lay claim to the East. Since August 15th, so about 16, about a half a month, they have only lost 3 games. So in about I think it was a 15-game span or a 16-game, I think it was a 15-game span, they are 12-3. So they have also had 24 home runs as a team, and some of those wins were against the Yankees. So again, looking at that right there, as of recently, they're starting to pick up the pace. I mean, even more than they were, earlier on in the year. And in fact, four of them were, and 3 of them were, 3 games, or there was a 3-game series that was a sweep, and a 4-game series that was also a sweep back in later August. And actually, I mean, that's some really good, really good numbers right there out of the Rays winning, a sweep of the Yankees in one game and then taking, another 3 or 4 games away from them as well later on. So putting up 7 or 8 wins against the division, kind of the top dog in the division. No wonder why the Rays are now 3.5 games ahead of the Yankees. And the Yankees, since August 15th, have been 7-8, with a 7-game losing streak right in the middle of that span. So clearly a team that is starting to go downhill a little bit, and with Aaron Judge going back on the IL, Stanton is still on the IL, Gleyber Torres is on the IL, it's starting to show a little bit. The Yankees are struggling, and it's very obvious. This Yankees offense, for as wildly dominant as everyone makes them seem, which they are, no question. I mean, I'm not taking that away from them. They are, a top 5, lineup. They're a top 5 offensive hitting team, but they only have 2 wins this year with double-digit runs being scored, while the Rays have 4 wins with double-digit runs being scored. So, again, nothing crazy, not a wild anomaly of a stat, but this Rays team, I mean, they're no joke, and I think people get caught up in the glamour of the Yankees lineup, and myself included. I mean, when you have 2 of the most dominant power hitters in baseball, and the AL as well, mixed in with LeMahieu, who, I mean, he's also been a top-tier hitter, and Torres, who's shown power hitting abilities, Urshela, Sanchez, when, he isn't hitting below the Mendoza line, obviously, they are no question, when they are fully healthy, the best team on paper in the AL probably. Again, that is on paper and with a fully healthy roster. But that is not the case right now. The Rays are in almost a David versus Goliath kind of battle, with the Rays, a small market team, beating up on one of the most storied, historic, and well-paid baseball teams ever. It's easy to see this starting to, play out a little bit for the Rays in their favor. They need to keep their momentum going if they want to find themselves actually taking the division this year, and they can't allow the Yankees to gain any sort of ground on them, and they cannot afford, a 3-game losing streak here, or a 5-game losing streak here, or dropping 4 of 6 here, or getting swept by the Yankees. They cannot afford any of that. But I think that the Rays, they've got their pedal to the metal. They're putting all of their pressure on the gas right now, and I think that they're heading right towards winning the AL East. The next forecast I have is the Astros won't make the playoffs. So Houston, do we have a problem? And to be honest, I think that they do. This might be a little bit of a reach, though, but with how they've been playing this year and how other teams in their league have been playing, I could see the Astros not making the playoffs this year. I really could. They have been playing well as of late, but looking at the playoff picture, they aren't catching the A's, which somewhat, is comical to me that the A's are still sitting fairly comfortable in first place. And I don't know, what you consider comfortable, but 3 games right now is an okay amount of space between, first and second place, I think, right now. But what's comical is that the A's don't have one starting hitter in their first 9 players above 300, and they only have 1 player that has a 900 or higher OPS. So they don't have, they don't have a whole bunch of power hitting numbers, but they do have 6 of their starting 9 players with 12 or more RBIs this year, and 3 guys with over, 20 RBIs. So a very efficient team in terms of scoring and driving in runs. They're kind of your prototypical present-day baseball team. They've gone away from the small ball idea, and they have started to really take the power-hitting philosophy into each and every game and each and every season, and it's starting to work for them. And they've built up from the ground up. They've done a nice job at developing talent in their farm system. It's no wonder the A's are in first place. The Astros have every single hitter in their first 9 with double-digit RBIs, though. But similar to the A's, not one guy is batting over 300, and only 1 player has above a 900 OPS. So somewhat similar of a team, but not really. And I know it's the Astros, and they are a very talented team, but this just doesn't seem like their year. And now I could maybe see them push for the wild card potentially, but the division, I think the A's have that one in the bag. I really don't think that the A's are going to let up that, first place spot. They would need to have some sort of massive drop-off or decline in the next 2 to 3 weeks for anything to happen for the Astros to make some sort of, miraculous turnaround here in the next 10 to 15 games. These 2 teams have been playing similar ball lately, but the A's 6-4 over their last 10, and the Astros 5-5. The Astros have struggled on the road this year, and they have 25 games remaining this year, with 17 of them being on the road. So an Astros team that does not do very well in road ballparks, and over 50% of their games for the remainder of the year are coming on the road. The odds do not seem to be in the favor of the Astros right now. That's why I feel that they will probably be left out of the playoffs. Plus, with the Indians and the White Sox both vying for that first place spot in the Central, whomever is taking that is going to be kicked into the wild card. So that's going to move everybody down, because right now the wild card, it has both the Indians and the White Sox sitting tied. But that's going to probably change once one of those teams becomes, the first place team. And the Yankees and Twins, they're also ahead of them for the wild card spot as well. And that puts them as, the fifth team in that order, and with the Blue Jays and Tigers not too far behind, they are going to need to improve their, on the road play if they want any sort of a shot at making it into the postseason this year, because I really do think that, if they can't get any sort of road wins coming these next 17 of 25 games that will be on the road, they're going to find themselves, packing their bags and hitting the road and heading home come playoff time, which is something that we don't really see very often the last few years in Houston, a postseason where, the Astros are not involved. So the next and final forecast that I have for this season that I personally, might be one of the most likely ones, and that is the AL Central will be decided in the last week to the last few days of the season. I mean, this is a tight race atop the leaderboard in the Central. The Indians and the White Sox are tied for first, while the Twins have dropped out of the first place spot for the first time this season. And the Tigers, again, they've woken up and started playing much better. Now, the Tigers are probably out of it. I mean, maybe if they went on a 7 to 8 game winning streak, they could find themselves, taking a wild card spot in the AL. But this is going to be a division that we don't know who the winner will be until the final week of the season, in terms of it'll, still be that close that it might actually come down to the final few days of the regular season, if not the final day of the regular season. The White Sox are one of the baseball's hottest teams right now, winning 7 of their last 10, and the Indians, they've chipped their way into the first place conversation after being in, 2 to 3 for most of the year, or second and third place for most of the year. So now that the Indians, they've started to find themselves in first place. The White Sox, they've really figured it out. The Twins are starting to slip a little bit. Things are shifting around in the Central. The White Sox take on division opponents for 3 of their next 5 series, with these 2 teams actually meeting in Cleveland in the final week of the season. That series will be the biggest series either team will play this year if these standings stay the way they are right now. I will say, in the head-to-head matchup on the year, the Indians lead the matchup 4-2, but a lot of those games have been decided by 1 to 2 runs. There's only one, big win by the Indians, which was a 7-1 decision over the White Sox. The Indians did lose Clevenger, with who although hadn't been pitching a ton for them since being demoted, he was still a vital part of the rotation that has been, absolutely insane all year long. The White Sox lineup has been hitting much better as of late. Jose Abreu has started figuring it out. Tim Anderson is, back to his normal self, both finding their rhythm from the plate. Anderson now hitting his usual 345 from the plate, so the reigning batting champion has finally found his hitting stride. With 4 of their 9 starters having a 900 or higher OPS, no wonder the White Sox have started to heat up. They've got a top 5 batting offense in baseball. The Indians, on the other hand, they haven't had the power hitting the White Sox have had this year. Only one player is hitting above a 900 OPS for Cleveland, and with Sandy Leon and Carlos Santana both struggling, both hitting, sub 250, sub 220 at that, it's going to be, on the shoulders of Francisco Lindor to try and pull this team into that lone first place spot. Chicago is in the top 10 in not only team hitting, but also in runs scored per game, with just over 5 runs scored a game. The Indians are in the 20s for runs scored per game and have shown their dominance through, really the pitching. With Shane Bieber, he's been a major contender for the Cy Young all year. Zach Plesac has done very well. When Clevenger was with them, he'd been doing very well. So their rotation had been, at the time, one of the top rotations that you could have, really, in not only the AL, but really all of baseball. So this will be a good old-fashioned, I think, pitcher-batter duel, between these 2 teams, with the hitting of the White Sox against the pitching of the Indians, which, like I mentioned, it has taken a hit with Clevenger gone. So we'll see how they are able to respond. But with Plesac and with Bieber really manning that rotation, it's going to take a lot to shut down the White Sox bats. That final week of the season, September 21st to 24th, it's going to be a pivotal series. So mark it on your calendar, folks, because that is going to be the series that could make or break these 2 team seasons. So that'll do it for this segment, folks. Thanks again for sticking around. Stay right there, though. We'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment today, which includes talk on how fans have become creative in trying to watch live sporting events at the stadium without being allowed to go into the game, obviously, and what might teams start to do come playoff time and moving forward into next year if no fans at games continues on. Don't go anywhere, everyone, because we have one last segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for the final segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer still with you, and in the last segment I got into some predictions for the second half of the year and how I could see the rest of the season playing out with playoffs right around the corner. I want to now dive into a topic of how, fans have been getting creative with watching games, possibly outside of the stadium or in other ways with games not allowing fans, and how teams might start getting creative themselves in allowing fans to be around the ballpark come game day during the playoff time. So the other day I was watching, I think it was the Phillies-Braves game, and I kept hearing some cowbells, screaming, yelling, and I didn't know what it was because I was very confused because obviously not allowed to have fans in the stands this year due to COVID-19. So I'm sitting there thinking, what in the world is that noise? Come to find out, as the broadcast then pans over into the outside of the stadium, there's fans all lined up along the gates in Philadelphia going nuts. They've got signs, they've got cowbells, they've got clappers, they're hooting and hollering, they're having a grand old time. And I sat there and I said, wow, this is actually a very creative way in which people could go and see games. And, especially with not being able to go see them in person now in the stadium. And it got me thinking, how can teams, with the playoffs right around the corner and with the season starting to wind down and all this uncertainty with the virus and who knows what's going to happen with that and if we'll be able to have, fans back in the stands, come, next year, next spring, next summer, got me thinking a little bit. And actually, another thing that I noticed that fans have started to do, in addition to stand outside of stadiums, a lot of fans have started to just wait for the other team's, team bus. I know that there was a couple of San Diego Padres fans when the Houston Astros rolled into town, and, it was actually pretty funny. They had, all their Padres, gear on or whatever, and then they had brooms, and they were basically kind of taunting the Astros, saying, we're going to sweep you guys, we're going to sweep you guys. So, again, interesting ways that fans are becoming involved and trying to stay involved, because obviously the digital fans that Fox has been doing has been really cool. I actually think that is the most, stadium atmosphere, most similar stadium atmosphere that you can get without having actual fans in the stadiums. But then the cardboard cutouts are cool too. I'm not, hating on that either. There's actually been a couple cardboard cutouts that I've seen that are pretty funny, since, people will put messages on them. Hey, hey mom, hope you're watching, or, hey honey, thanks for letting me do this, or, having a good time at the ball game, whatever it might be. I've seen a couple different messages. Actually, I think it was a guy, he had his cardboard cutout put there, and I think he had something saying along the lines of, I'm sorry honey, I didn't mean to, I think he was talking to his wife or whatever. But again, pretty funny, good funny stuff. But it got me thinking, how are fans going to be able to watch their team if they're in the playoffs? So for me in Pittsburgh, I know that, obviously the Pirates are not going to make the playoffs, but the Penguins, they have been a massive, massive team in, the last, however long that they've been around, and especially since the 90s, 2000s, and the 2010s. And what they would do usually is, and a lot of other teams also do this, they've got an area outside of the stadium where they pretty much block it all off for people to sit around with lawn chairs and, any other sort of, blankets, towels, whatever you want to bring food, bring your own beverages, what have you. And they call it the big screen in Pittsburgh. And it's just this massive, big projected screen that is outside of PPG Arena that you can watch the game, that is going on live inside. So it got me thinking, hey, you know what? I bet you teams could maybe make something very similar to this. I know that the Milwaukee Bucks, they actually also have something very similar that they used during the postseason last year. The Raptors, the Toronto Raptors, the NBA team, they also have something like that as well. Now, I know everyone who's listening to this is probably saying, well, you obviously can't do that. I mean, it's social distancing. Okay, sure. But I have seen a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of outdoor festivities that have been going on and that have gone on through COVID-19, and with, COVID-19 protocols. You could easily figure out, and again, this probably would be a big time, plan, and they probably have to really plan for this. So maybe something that we won't see in the playoffs, but something that we could potentially see next year if there's, fans are still not allowed back, or if it's 50% capacity or whatever it might be. So what they could do is they could charge, a fee, maybe nothing crazy, but basically like a ticket fee. And you have almost these little cubicles that you could be protected in. And, there would be almost like aisles in between these different cubicles. And, waiters and waitresses would go around asking if you wanted anything, if you wanted any drinks or whatever. And you had, your own little cubicle space to set up however you wanted and to watch the game. And these teams had these big projector, jumbotrons outside of the ballpark in order for fans to watch the game. I personally think that could work. You could have dividers. Everybody would be wearing masks unless they are inside of their divider. You could set up bathrooms around because if people need to use the bathroom, obviously there would be food and beverages, sold and whatnot. And at the same time, teams could start making some money back. And I know that has been a big thing this year about how much money has been lost due to this pandemic. And if you think about it, you start charging a fee, for these tickets. Some of these games, maybe for a playoff game, you can charge $25, $30. I mean, again, you can't really jack up the price on this stuff because you're not actually going to the stadium. But you can make it seem like, okay, it is a game-like atmosphere. We're setting something up. We are going to want you all to pay, but we are providing this for you so you can see your team play during the playoffs. So if they were to do that, I think it could get very interesting. I think it could get very creative. And even, come playoff time. I mean, who knows? Maybe the World Series, there's a lot of talk about the World Series potentially being in a hub city in potentially Texas, maybe using the Global Life, the new Ranger Stadium down in Arlington. I mean, imagine if people started, or if the MLB started charging, $50 to go see the World Series down in Arlington in front of the Jumbotron. $25 for regular season and $60 for postseason games. I mean, again, you'd have to cut the cost because you're not in the stadium, and, people aren't getting that same atmosphere, but they're able to go see their team play live in the next closest atmosphere and next closest capacity that they can without actually being in the stadiums. It's going to fill a void. I think it's going to eventually allow people to say, hey, okay, maybe I'll start going out a little bit more. Maybe I'll start going to games once games start picking back up. And people will start, loosening up a little bit and, hopefully, knock on wood, there's a vaccine that's figured out here in the next couple months, and then we don't have to worry about this. But I think it would be very interesting. And not to mention, I mean, think of all of the outdoor festivities that you could do for kids, social distancing activities that you could do. Maybe if the parents wanted to watch the games, and then you could, take your kid over to, this little workstation where they play and do whatever that it might be for the World Series. Now, I will say, I did think about it a little bit more. You can't really do this for every game. So right now, if some team said, hey, we're going to start having a Jumbotron outside of the ballpark, and we're going to shut down 4-block parameter radius from this time to this time, every single day, or every single home game at that. People would not like that. And I know that, come when next year and when your fans are allowed back, hopefully, into the stadium, you're obviously going to have that come back. You're obviously going to have post-game traffic. You're going to have, police officers, waving you through, directing traffic, whatever. So I get that this year you probably couldn't do it all the time. But if you think about it, again, if it weren't to be an everyday thing, maybe teams could charge a little bit more for tickets and make it more of a, hey, Saturday night outside the ballpark, or Saturday night, watching the game from the sidewalk, whatever, some sort of creative moniker to use to clue in and to grab fans to essentially want to pay that and then want to also, bring, their families to the games. The Jumbotron, I think, would be a huge hit. And I know that down in Pittsburgh, it's a ginormous thing. People get very excited for it. I mean, people will, cook food and bring it down, this, that, and the other. It would become an event. And I think, again, it would bring as normal as possible of a feel to this season that you can without, again, being in the stadium. Now, I could also see some businesses, maybe as time goes on, and maybe, people are, opposed to going to games from now on. Maybe there's some people that are saying, hey, I don't want to go to games anymore. I don't want to be in large crowds anymore. Not my thing. Get that. I totally understand that. So maybe that'll be an opportunity for some sort of business to come up and say, hey, we will provide you an in-game experience while not being surrounded by, fans everywhere. How would they do that? I don't know. I mean, you could maybe do something where, how the Cubs kind of have, that rooftop seating outside of their stadium. If there's any, ballparks that have rooftop, apartments around them, maybe there can be some company that says, hey, we'll lease out, and I don't think this is allowed, but this is all in theory as well, just a hypothetical, just a thought that I had. But you could lease out the roof, or you could, charge a certain amount for the roof, and then basically have a watch party up there. And, you space everybody out, this again would probably be a couple of years down the road, so people might not have, as much of a need to space out and wear masks, but there will be a condensed amount of people on a smaller scale, still being able to feel that, hey, I'm at the ballpark tonight, I'm watching the game, it might be a little bit far and it's not the greatest seats, but it's still, I'm outside, I'm watching live baseball. I mean, how much more, can you get, really? Other ideas, though, I don't think that you can feasibly, in a sense, have fans have an in-game experience without, being in the stadium minus those two. Now, you could probably maybe, hey, who knows, maybe these teams, they start, drive-thrus. What if you started paying almost like a drive-through movie theater, fee, and instead of seeing a movie, I know there was a lot of minor league teams that wound up turning their stadiums into drive-in movie theaters to make some money back. So I think that we could potentially see some teams possibly say, hey, we'll, lease out, the entire parking lot outside of the ballpark, set up some huge jumbotron, and everybody that brings, their car and sits in their car and stays in their car, you could come and watch the game. And maybe there'll be, a little, stand for food, or there might be people that'll go around and ask people for food. But I think it would be a really cool thing if, I know, and again, I hate to keep using Pittsburgh as an example, but it's just, a relevant one for me since I live here. The Pittsburgh Pirates have parking lots that, are right across the street. They run parallel to the stadium. And it's a massive parking lot. And it faces one side of PNC Park. You could easily, and again, I'm using PNC Park as just an example, you could easily bring down a projector and have the entire parking lot closed off to fans and fans only. And people just stay in their cars. People don't leave their cars unless they got to go to the bathroom. And if they have to go to the bathroom or they want to get food, they got to wear their mask, obviously. But again, just imagine the uproar, the excitement, that feel of, hey, we're back at a ball game. We're finally back to some sort of normalcy. People going nuts in their car, a big, 2-run home run, or a bottom of the ninth comeback, and their team wins in a dramatic fashion, or whatever it might be. That is going to be brought back through doing this, drive-in, whether it's, the drive-in idea, or maybe the, sitting outside in these, cubicles or whatever, or these glass, almost kind of like just a glass divider, or, a plastic divider that'll just separate everybody from each other. And, it's very doable. And I know it would probably take a lot of money to do this, and I know a lot of teams have lost a lot of money, but at the same time, I think that if they want to get, fans, and keep fans around for as long as possible, I think that could be a potential idea. I even remember, a couple months ago, I was throwing out an idea to my friends, and this would probably be the least likely idea out of all of them, because it wouldn't really give you that in-game feel, if you will. Maybe putting up little cameras at every single seat in the stadium. Again, that would take a lot of time, and it would spend a lot of money that teams probably don't want to do. But in theory, if you did that and you told fans, hey, clue in, here's this, security code, this access code, go to your team app and type this in, and then it will take you to, like, the seat where you would be sitting normally. And you can basically just move the phone around, and you can see everything that's going on in the stadium. And you obviously wouldn't be in the stadium, actually. So, again, a lot of different ideas, a lot of different possibilities. Obviously, will that happen? Probably not. There is, less than 30 games left in the season, and I don't see any teams, thinking about that right now, at least. But if this continues on, theoretically, and if we continue to be in this pandemic state, then, maybe next season there are some new ideas and new parameters that are put into place that could possibly continue to keep fans clued in, keep fans cheering and rooting for their team, as well as keeping everybody socially distanced and people still having that, at the ballpark feel. So we'll see what happens. Again, there's a lot of things that change every day with this, and there's a lot of things that, are moving pieces in this whole, makeup of this entire situation that we're in. So again, they're just some ideas, just some theories, but it'll be interesting. I mean, fans have already started to get creative with viewing games, and so I'm excited to see other creative ways that fans start, continuing to interact with their favorite teams and trying to watch baseball at the stadium, Saturday night under the lights or whatever it might be, and just having that normalcy still, in their everyday routine to whatever extent it might be. So that'll wrap it up for us here today. Thank you again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that would be much appreciated, so we can continue to clue you all in on any and all latest news, episodes, and content, and much, much more. Once again, everyone, thanks so much for joining me today and tuning in, and have a wonderful day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.